Welcome, everybody, to today's Building My Legacy podcast. I have with me today Jeff Heggie. He is rather interesting because amongst all of the things he's done with coaching, he is also a former cowboy. He has done rodeos, and I used to live in Lubbock, Texas, and used to see a lot of rodeos. So I respect that. That takes a certain amount of courage, drive, and just plain gumption. So I want to start with that. So let me just explain to the audience. He comes out of the banking industry. He's a coach. He works with entrepreneurs to really look at how do you grow and build your business. I'm sure you work with people in the banking industry as well coming out of that. He's also a former basketball coach. He's coached for 20 years in addition to his marvelous rodeo experience. So I want to start with that because that is rather unique. And I want to know, what did being a rodeo cowboy teach you? But tell me, what did you do? Was it roping the cows? Was it which part of the rodeo experience was it that you did?
Sure, absolutely. So, thank you. When I was in high school, my older brother started rodeoing before I did, and when I began, I started as a roper, and I was roping, and then he got into steer wrestling as well, and that's something that I really wanted to do. And so, I've actually on my podcast I've talked about courage and things like that, and so I use this story because I decided I wanted to be a steer wrestler. And for those that don't know what steer wrestling is, it's when you're on a horse running full speed down the arena and you jump off onto the horns of the steer and wrestle them to the ground. And so I called him one day and I said, Todd, I want to be a steer wrestler. I want you to teach me. And he says, okay, the next time we go out and practice, I'll give you a call and we can kind of show you some of the stuff. I said, well, that's kind of a problem. I entered a rodeo this weekend. You got to teach me before the weekend.
Oh, wow. Okay.
so
You
so I
put that.
started as a roper and I jumped both feet into the steer wrestling. It actually went well. That weekend I won second at the rodeo, and then I went through the amateur ranks and then rodeoed professionally for a number of years. But it's an interesting sport because you're, except for events such as the team roping, you're working as an individual, but everyone is so supportive of one another. It's a tight family. Everyone's helping one another. And, especially in rodeo, you're basically in a position where you're getting help from people that you're trying to beat. And so it really created some
Interesting.
real neat relationships. And yeah, there's definitely a lot of life learning experiences from it. I had an unfortunate situation. It was still when I was in the amateur circuits where I got in an accident, had a really bad head injury. I had a horse land on my head. And there's a span of at least 2 weeks that I don't have any recollection of. And, there's a lot of repercussions from that. But even events like that taught me a lot of life lessons and, prioritizing things and those sort of things. So it was a good experience throughout my life.
Okay, so going to wrestling a steer without ever having training, there's something rather brazen about that. But it also says fear doesn't intimidate you. So how did you arrive at that? I mean, what brought you to that place? Because that's unusual.
You know what? I mean, I've always been an adrenaline junkie. I've done the skydiving, the cliff jumping, all those sort of things. Um, and I've enjoyed those sort of things. So that gets me excited about things. But it's also facing your fears and taking them head on, because, one of the things I talk a lot about is fear. It's something in the future that's not real, and we let it control us so much, and we've got to overcome those things. One of the things I teach my clients is to find something every day to step out of your comfort zone, because when you do that on a daily basis, all of a sudden your comfort zone is pretty big. And so I'll tell you the story of how this all went about. So when my brother took me to practice and teach me, he said, okay, I understand. You're on a horse running full speed, jumping onto the horns of another animal. It's scary, especially your first times. So if you ride by the first time and you don't get off, I understand. In fact, if you ride by the second time and don't get off, I understand. But at that point, if you keep doing that, the fear just keeps building up, and it's that much harder to do it. So if you do that on the third time, I'm putting a rope around your waist and I'm pulling you off. Whether the steer's there or not, you're hitting the ground.
Oh, wow.
And so I had two choices: jump off onto the horns or eventually get pulled off onto the ground. And I actually, the very first steer I chased, I jumped off and was able to do it. And it it gave me, I guess, part of it, the alternatives were giving me the courage to do it, but it was also just looking at it and knowing that if I didn't do it, it would get more and more difficult. And I think a lot of the fears we face in life, when we put things off, the more we procrastinate, the more we put them off, the more difficult they become.
That's so, so true. And we hope it's going to go away, the fear that is. And
Yeah.
and yet when you have an experience like you've got where you have an animal and you don't have too many choices, either you do it or you don't. Um, it is you're pushed. It's that pain versus pleasure. And it's
Yeah.
at the most high intensity, right? So you just have got to gun it and move. So I'm amazed at that. So tell me, what was it that allowed you to, that was focus, right? You had to be focused.
Yeah.
And it was the focus that probably got you through and controlled the fear. So it didn't take hold of you. So just tell me, when you got on that horse, you knew you were going to tackle that steer. How did you manage yourself in your mindset so that you could accomplish what you were going after?
The first step was getting over the fact that the heart was beating out of my chest. but a lot of it was focus. And I'll have to admit, the first time, things are happening so fast, and as I got more and more experienced, it seemed to slow down for me. But it was breaking it into pieces and
Okay.
taking it one step at a time, because I mean, in the process of it, if you're looking at steer wrestling, you're backed into the corner. There's a process of nodding your head so they'll open the chute and the steer starts running. Then you go, and then there's a lot of processes, like
Walk us through those
my
processes. I'm fascinated by it.
for sure. And you look at it, my fastest time in a rodeo was 3.4 seconds. And so when you look at these processes, there's a lot of things that happens in 3.4 seconds. So you're riding this horse, you get to a certain spot on that steer and you're holding onto the saddle horn on the horse, and you slide down onto the side of the horse. And then you've got to, with your right arm, you're hooking the outside horn into your elbow. You're grabbing the other horn with your left hand. And through the techniques, there's certain areas where you have to place those horns. And then the horse keeps running, your feet hit the ground, and then you've got to know how to control your feet so that steer comes to a stop, comes around your hip, and then you take your left hand that's on the left horn, you reach down and catch the steer's nose in your elbow, and that's how you roll them over onto their back. And so there's a lot of things that happen in a run such as 3.4 seconds. But as you as I got more and more experience, those things I could slow them down. And even though it was happening quickly, it was one step at a time.
Okay. So a steer typically will weigh how much?
Uh 400 to 700 pounds.
Okay. So the velocity of that at the speed at which they go is pretty amazing, right? And your feet are on
Yeah.
the ground, you're running alongside to pull them down. So is it the technique that pulls the bull over? Because certainly it isn't power. He's got the greater power.
Absolutely. Yeah. And most of it is technique. I mean, in the rodeo, they call it the big man's event because obviously being big is a benefit, but there is a lot of technique to it. And like I said, when you're coming off and you grab those horns, the placement of where you put those horns before your feet hit the ground really has an impact of what you're doing. With your left horn, if it's too high, when that steer hits the ground, they have the leverage and they're going to carry you to the end of the arena.
Oh, wow. Got it. So would you visualize this in your mind before a race, step by step by step? Or how would you prepare for a competition?
That's actually interesting. Yesterday, I was actually doing the recording for one of my modules in a mindset course that I'm doing, and I talked exactly about that. Is I before it was my turn, I would sit there and I would visualize everything from when I backed into the box to when I nodded my head to watching the steer come out and just step by step. And especially with those specific techniques of that play a vital role in your success or failure. And I would visualize those very clearly. And Neville Goddard, when he talks about visualizing, he says to put yourself in the position of doing it rather than watching it. So rather than being an observer, be a participant. And that's how I would do it. Is I wouldn't watch it like I'm watching a TV of someone steer wrestling. I would watch it in my mind as if it was me doing it and going through that process.
Right. Amazing. So tell me, now you're a coach. You're an adrenaline junkie. Sitting in a chair and coaching must drive you crazy.
Not well, yeah, and no. I mean, I still have a lot of opportunities. I mean, I mentioned that I've been skydiving and stuff like that. When I did that, it was I took my team and we went as a group. One of the companies I own, we went as a group of from our staff and went skydiving. And so as a staff, we still do things. And I mentioned that I've been a basketball coach for 20 years. Most of that time has been coaching my children. And my daughter, I coached her all the way up through her senior year, and then she went on to collegiate ball and stuff. But even that, having the opportunity to be in a position where I'm coaching an athletic team, that's adrenaline for me.
So the role of adrenaline in your life today is it what gives you momentum?
I would say it does to a degree. It gives me excitement. It gives me the excitement and drive, and so yeah, that would build into my momentum. Yeah.
It is just amazing because I can remember so vividly those rodeos I used to go to in Texas. And Texas is proud of their rodeos, and they were some of the best that you would go to. And it was interesting because I didn't know really much about the sport at the time, but you get so as a observer, you watch how people walk, how they talk to other people, and you begin to go, okay, that one's nervous. And so, when you'd see them get on the horse, you you breathe more shallowly. At least I would, because I was afraid for them. And so it was interesting how, as an observer, you would pick up on those cues without really knowing or understanding. I didn't know or understand the sport at that time. I was a newbie at it, at watching. But I think the other thing that just impressed me was the sheer gut. It really was mind over matter. I'm going to beat this animal no matter what, right? And
Right.
that's a big challenge. So I want to go on from that. You do a lot of mindset coaching. So when you work with mindset, what is it that you focus on, and what is it about mindset in terms of business that you find is important? And how do you help people get ready, get their mindset together?
Absolutely. Thank you. Life, whether you're looking at business or whatever it is, I think it ties in so much with sports. And so actually in my courses, I talk a lot about rodeo. I talk a lot about basketball and stuff like that because there are so many similarities. And, a lot of the problems that people face are the limiting beliefs that they've developed over years that hold them back from their real true potential. And many of it, I have someone that I've been working with, and some of her most challenging limiting beliefs were some things that were said to her in a conversation between her father and her grandmother when she was 6 years old. And she wasn't even realizing that's what was holding her back. And when we look at the conversations that we have in our head, it's a matter of we're asking and answering questions to ourselves on an ongoing basis. And a lot of people, when something happens, the questions they're asking themselves are things like, why do I think I could do that? Why is this happening to me? And they're really on the negative side of things. And so one of the things that I really try to focus on is those habitual questions that people are asking themselves, because it's not going to, going through my courses or working with me or whatever doesn't mean you're never going to have a negative thought again.
Right.
But you recognize them. And when you can recognize them, you can interrupt that pattern and you can start changing that conversation. And then one of the techniques that I use a lot is, for example, I call it my mindset journal. And in it, I include what I call my mindset questions. And every day you go through, and the morning starts with some questions and it ends with some questions at the end of the day. And those questions are basically set up to help prime you for the day. And then it also includes a space to write out all your goals for the day and just focus on those things. Because one of the things I really believe is through the power of your reticular activating system, your RAS, you can find a lot of the answers you're looking for. And just to explain, anyone listening that doesn't know what the RAS is, a story I use a lot is when we moved from Canada to Arizona, I bought my daughter a little Mitsubishi convertible car. I'd never seen this car before that I was aware of. And after I bought it, I saw this car everywhere. And it wasn't the fact that that car wasn't around before. It just wasn't important to me. So your reticular activating system is a filter because we've got millions of things going on around us all the time. It helps you recognize the things that are important to you. It's like when you buy a new outfit and then you see other people wearing the same outfit. Right. And so when you're focused on answering these questions on a regular basis, and your mind is looking at these things and you're focused on your goals every day, your mind is looking for the answers that are going to help you achieve those things. And so it's just a matter of habit. And the more we can work on these things and the more we can make them a dominating thought in our mind, the more we're going to recognize the opportunities that we need to achieve those goals.
So as you work with people, Jeff, what do you find are some of the things that hold people back the most?
I think one of the biggest things, their limiting beliefs definitely are, but what we talked about earlier is the fears that they have. And the interesting thing is, so many times when they finally can get themselves to move forward on something, all those fears that were holding them back, they never happen. So many of the fears that we have, we build them up and we give them so much power over us, but they never even happen to us anyways.
It's not amazing. It is such a human aspect, isn't it? We worry. It's like the storm is coming. It's like when we get the hurricane reports. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. I felt that way with COVID. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming.
Yeah.
And you wait. And now, almost 8 months later, it's finally hitting our state. And you go, oh, okay.
Exactly.
But that is part of the challenge we deal with is there's a lot of things that are out there that are impending. And you're right, they never happen. Or if they do happen, that impendingness allows us to prepare, right? So
Right.
you don't have to be caught off balance. And so is that part of what you do with mindset, is to really look at pulling pieces together so that you can literally walk into the fear and whether it happens or doesn't happen.
And yeah, and one of the things I really like to look at too is I believe it was Tony Robbins that I heard say this, is when you look at things and a lot of the things that you're afraid might happen, when you can change your perspective on them from life is happening for me rather than to me, you can really take those fears on differently. Because when I mean, some of the things that I've faced throughout my career that I had fears from, and they actually did come to pass, and they were terrible at the moment. But then in hindsight, looking at what I learned from that experience and maybe what it prevented me from going a different direction, there's a lot of power in it. So even though something that might not be what we want or ideal or something that we've been fearing might happen to us, if we look at it from the aspect of, okay, this is happening, I've got to find what I can take from this and learn from it and make my future better, and take this as a learning experience and grow from it. Because we're not going to grow from it if all we're doing is living in the sorrow of what's happening.
Right. It's that learning, isn't it? That is so huge, because if we learn, we tend not to be as angry, right? Because we've shifted how our mind approaches it. So as you work with people, as they look at what it is that they're tackling, and you help them step into whatever fears or anxieties that they might have with it, then do you take your time as you're walking through and as the event concludes to really look at what do we learn, what do we take forward from this, so you have that shift that you're taking with you into your next activities? Is that part of the process, Jeff?
It is, because even when things are going great and you're knocking off goals and doing all these great things, one of the things that I see a lot of people not doing well is recognizing what they've achieved. Because they'll set a goal, and then 6 months later they're setting new goals and whatever. They're not even looking back and saying, you know what, the goals that I set 6 months ago, I'm living those now. They're living what was once just a dream. But because they're so focused on moving on to their next goals or their next task, whatever it is, they don't even reflect on what they've achieved. And whether it's they've achieved something or they failed at something, if they take the time to reflect on that, and what are the lessons, whether it's a failure or an achievement, what are the lessons that I can learn going forward that are going to make me that much stronger and be better in the next experiences. And I mean, that's the same thing with what I was saying about stepping out of your comfort zone on a daily basis, so your comfort zone continually gets better. When you have these experiences, whether they're wins or failures, that grows that comfort zone in that particular area and gives you that experience. So when you're faced with it again, you're going to do better. But you need to take the time to reflect on it and understand what you just went through.
Jeff, our time is almost over. It is so fascinating to talk with you and to hear about your experiences. What have we missed that is important for our audience to know?
You know what? We could probably sit here all day talking about this. There's so many things that I get passionate about talking about this. And it's just a matter that, you know, whether you're an entrepreneur, an athlete, or whatever area of life you're in, when you can develop a powerful mindset, it's going to help you to become more successful in whatever that is you're trying to achieve. And so it's just a matter of figuring out what it is you need to focus on, how you need to overcome those limiting beliefs and change those conversations in your head so that you're in charge of them.
So you're in charge. Boy, you know what? Isn't that the truth? It's easier to think somebody else is doing it to me than to think that I'm in charge and I can control the results by how I choose to look at it, the story I want to create. Yeah. Jeff, thank you so much. And for those of you who are listening, we will have information about Jeff in the show notes so you can get in contact with him if you would like to do so. If you have difficulty or want more information, feel free to call or to email us, and we'll be glad to connect you with Jeff. Jeff, thank you. What a delight. I love that beginning experience of yours. It just takes me back to those old days in Texas, which were just so much fun. And
well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for listening to Building My Legacy podcast today. Visit our website at www.buildtomorrow.com and our social media sites as well, buildtomorrow.com on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. And we look forward to talking with you again very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell button above. Leave comments. We'd love to hear what you think. And visit our other social media links as well. Thanks much.